If you think you found a coin worth just 1 cent that could in fact be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars, stick around, because today we're unlocking the hidden world of the 1981 Liberty 1 cent, one of the most commonly overlooked modern coins, yet one that has secrets collectors pay serious money for. Most people see this penny and pass it off as scrap metal or everyday pocket change, but the truth is that within this single year of Lincoln cents lies a fascinating variety of errors, minting quirks, and rare variations that can propel its market value far above its face value of 1 cent. Some examples are downright common, selling for only a few cents above face. Others, especially authenticated error coins or high-grade uncirculated pieces, have sold for hundreds, and in extraordinary situations even thousands, of dollars or more to eager collectors. Let's start with the basics before diving deep into what makes certain 1981 pennies so valuable. The 1981 Lincoln cent was produced by the United States Mint during a period when the penny was still struck primarily from 95% copper and 5% zinc composition. These pennies were minted at 3 different facilities: Philadelphia, which uses no mint mark on the coin and produced billions of pieces; Denver, which places a D mint mark on its coins and also produced over 5 billion examples; and the San Francisco Mint, which struck collector-proof coins with an S mint mark in much smaller quantities relative to business strike coins. With numbers this large in circulation, the vast majority of 1981 pennies are worth virtually nothing above face value when found in loose change. They typically trade for around a few cents based simply on condition, color, and general collector interest. But if you've ever wondered why a tiny difference in appearance or flaw on the coin can suddenly make it valuable, the real answer lies in how coins are manufactured and graded and the kinds of mistakes that can occur during that process. All coins that enter circulation begin life as blank planchets, small flat metal discs punched from larger sheets of metal. Those blanks are fed into giant coining presses where they are struck under immense pressure between 2 dies engraved with the design of the coin. Ideally, every step of this process would be flawless, and the resulting coins would all look uniform. But in reality, errors can and do happen. Some mistakes are caught by mint quality control and destroyed, others slip through, and these flawed coins eventually enter circulation or are found in collector's sets, where their rarity and uniqueness boost their value. Not all errors are created equal. Some barely change the appearance of the coin and add only a modest premium above face value, while others dramatically alter the coin's look or strike integrity and can command thousands of dollars when authenticated and graded by professional services. One of the most intriguing and lucrative categories of error coins are wrong planchet strikes, where a coin intended to be one denomination is mistakenly struck on the metal blank for another denomination. For the 1981 penny, there are documented cases of cents struck on planchets that were meant for dimes or nickels. A 1981 Lincoln cent struck on a dime planchet is unmistakable. It is smaller, lighter, and silver-colored, with only the penny design impressed on a blank meant for a different coin. These kinds of errors are extremely unusual precisely because quality control typically catches them, and as a result, examples that have been verified and authenticated can sell for prices in the low thousands to even above $3,000 depending on condition and market demand. Similarly, 1981 cents struck on nickel planchets, which are larger and heavier, are also highly collectible error varieties commanding significant premiums. Another class of error that increases value compared to the coin's face value is the off-center strike. In an off-center strike, the coin blank was not properly aligned in the press, and the dies struck it away from the center. This results in a crescent-shaped, incomplete design, often with portions of letters, numbers, or imagery missing. Off-center coins that still show the date and mint mark clearly are especially interesting to collectors. Smaller off-center errors might only draw modest interest, maybe worth $10 to a few $100s, but dramatic off-center strikes with 40 to 60% of the coin missing can be worth significantly more because they are visually arresting and much rarer. Closely related to off-center strikes are broad strikes and die cracks. A broad strike occurs when the retaining collar that normally holds the coin blank in place fails to work correctly, allowing the coin to expand outward more than usual. The resulting broad strike penny can appear wider and flatter than normal. Die cracks are formed when a die used to strike coins develops a fracture. Have you ever picked up what looks like an ordinary penny off the sidewalk or out of your change jar and wondered if it might secretly be worth far more than 1 cent? What if I told you that one of the most common coins ever made in the United States, the 1984 Lincoln 1 cent, actually holds secrets that can make some examples worth hundreds, thousands, or even many thousands of dollars in the collector market? This coin that most people toss into the cash register or ignore in a pocket could be hiding dramatic errors, misstrikes, and variations that serious collectors hunt for, pay premium prices for, and sometimes never expect to find. Now, we are going to talk about the fascinating world of the 1984 Liberty 1 cent, why its current market value can be wildly different from its face value of 1 cent, what types of errors and mint mark varieties exist, how they happened in the first place, how collectors and grading services assign value, what real market prices have been, and why even a tiny change in how a penny looks can make a massive difference in what someone will pay for it. If you have a jar of old coins sitting around, or you are curious how everyday pocket change can be worth real money, this story is for you, because the 1984 penny has a history, a mystery, and a value story most people overlook. The 1984 Lincoln 1 cent is part of a lineage that traces back to the very beginning of the Lincoln Cent series, first introduced in 1909 to honor Abraham Lincoln on the centennial of his birth. The Lincoln cent was groundbreaking because it was the first regular United States coinage to feature a real person on the obverse instead of symbolic figures like Liberty or allegorical representations. The design was created by Victor David Brenner and featured a portrait of Lincoln on the front and 2 wheat ears on the reverse in the early years. That design ran from 1909 until 1958, when the reverse was changed to the Lincoln Memorial to commemorate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. The Lincoln Memorial design continued to be used year after year, becoming one of the most common coin types in American circulation ever made. By 1984, the Lincoln cent had been in continuous production for 75 years and was an everyday part of life in the United States. At that time, the penny was still seen as a basic unit of currency, but for collectors it had grown in significance because of its long history, numerous varieties, and increasing interest in error coins. In the early 1980s, there was a major change in the composition of the penny. For decades, pennies had been struck from a composition of mostly copper. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, the price of copper had risen so much that the metal value of the 1 cent piece was approaching and sometimes exceeding its face value. To combat this problem and reduce production costs, the United States Mint changed the composition of the penny in 1982 from a copper alloy to a copper-plated zinc planchet. Essentially, the coins struck after the change were zinc cores with a thin copper plating on the outside. Because the metal cost was lower, the mint could continue producing pennies at scale without losing money on each one. By 1984, nearly all pennies in circulation were being struck on these copper-plated zinc planchets, and that is the metal composition you are likely to find if you look at any 1984 penny today. The 1984 Lincoln cent was struck at multiple mints. The Philadelphia Mint struck pennies that bear no mint mark at all because Philadelphia coins traditionally have no mint mark in many years. The Denver Mint struck pennies that carry a small d mint mark just below the date on the obverse. There were also proof pennies struck at the San Francisco Mint that carry an S mint mark. These were generally intended for collectors and not released into general circulation. All of these coins were produced in enormous numbers. There were billions of 1984 pennies made, and because they were everyday coins used in commerce, most of them went into circulation all across the United States. In ordinary circulated condition, most 1984 pennies are worth only their face value or just a few cents to collectors. That is because the mintage numbers are so large and the coins are so common that unless a coin has something unusual about it, collectors typically do not pay much for them. Most people find a 1984 penny in their change and think nothing of it because they see it every day. But there is a fascinating world hidden beneath the surface, and that world exists because of errors, mistakes, and minting anomalies that occur during production. To understand how these errors happen, it helps to know a little bit about how coins are made. U.S. coins start as blank metal discs called planchets. These planchets are fed into enormous mechanical presses that have 2 engraved dies, one for the front of the coin and one for the back. When the press comes down with tremendous force. Have you ever picked up a seemingly ordinary penny from your change jar, looked at it for a moment, and tossed it aside without a second thought? What if I told you that one of those pennies might be worth hundreds, thousands, or even more than its face value because of tiny mistakes that happened during the minting process? Now, we're diving into a coin that many people overlook, but that has a secret world of value hiding beneath its surface. This is the story of the 1992 D Liberty 1 cent, a coin that almost everyone recognizes, but very few truly understand why some examples can fetch serious money in the collector market. Most of these pennies were ordinary and used in everyday transactions for decades, but a small fraction are error coins, mint mark anomalies, misstrikes, or unusual varieties that have transformed them into prized collectibles. Whether you are a coin collector yourself, someone who's curious about rare coins in circulation, or just someone who likes the idea that a penny could be worth more than $1, stick with me. We're going to explore the fascinating history, the types of errors and mistakes that exist on the 1992 D penny, how to identify them, why they happen, and how that can dramatically change what the coin is worth compared to its 1-cent face value. The Lincoln 1 cent has been a cornerstone of American coinage since its introduction in 1909. It was designed to honor President Abraham Lincoln on the 100th anniversary of his birth, and it was groundbreaking as the first circulating U.S. coin to feature a real person on the obverse. Over the decades that followed, the Lincoln cent became one of the most ubiquitous coins in the United States. In 1959, the reverse was redesigned to feature the Lincoln Memorial, commemorating the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth. The design remained in circulation for many years, and in 1992 the Lincoln Memorial reverse was still the standard design, featuring the image of the memorial building framed by wheat stalks and lettering. The obverse, of course, featured the familiar portrait of Lincoln himself. By 1992 the United States Mint was producing huge quantities of pennies every year to keep up with the demand of everyday commerce. The 1-cent coin had become so common that most people never gave much thought to the individual coins they handled. They were simply small pieces of copper-plated zinc metal, used to make change, handed back and forth at cash registers, and saved in jars and piggy banks. In 1982 the composition of the penny had changed from primarily copper to a core of zinc coated with a thin layer of copper, but the overall look and feel of the coin remained much the same. Most pennies in circulation after 1982 were copper-plated zinc, including the vast majority of those struck in 1992. In that year, the United States Mint struck pennies at multiple facilities. The Philadelphia Mint produced coins that carried no mint mark, the Denver Mint produced coins that carried a small D mint mark beneath the date, and the San Francisco Mint produced proof coins for collectors that carried an S mint mark. The thousands of millions of these coins entered circulation, were used in everyday transactions, and eventually found their way into collections, coin rolls, jars of loose change, and cash drawers across the country. For most of these coins, their story is simple: they spend decades in circulation, accumulate wear and tear, get lost or saved, and eventually return to dealers or collectors as standard examples. The majority of 1992 D pennies that you find in circulation today are worth only their face value 1 cent or maybe a few cents to a collector who is filling out a date and mint mark set. That's because they were produced in massive numbers, and many were handled in circulation for years before being pulled out of service. Circulated examples show wear, scratches, dull surfaces, and the kinds of marks that come from everyday use. Most coin collectors are interested in coins that are in much better condition, or that have some unusual characteristic that makes them stand out from the ordinary. What makes the 1992 D penny intriguing to collectors is the fact that errors and anomalies occasionally occurred during minting, and some of these errors are far more rare than ordinary coins. It's these rare examples that can command prices dramatically higher than 1 cent and sometimes reach hundreds or even thousands of dollars in the collector market. To understand why, we need to take a closer look at how coins are made, what kinds of mistakes can occur, and how collectors and grading services view these coins. Coins begin their life as blank metal discs called planchets. For pennies struck in 1992, these planchets were copper-plated zinc discs. The planchets are fed into enormous coin presses, where two hardened steel dies, one engraved with the obverse design and the other with the reverse design, strike the plan. Have you ever held a penny in your hand and wondered if it might be worth far more than just 1 cent? What if I told you that hiding among everyday change might be a tiny piece of metal that someone would pay tens of thousands or even over $100,000 for? What if that unremarkable Lincoln penny you found in the grocery store parking lot or dug out of an old jar could be a rare error coin worth more than most people's monthly rent in some parts of the world? Believe it or not, there is one specific year of penny that has captured the attention of collectors and investors alike because of an incredibly rare minting mistake: the 2001 Liberty 1 cent. Now we are going to explore the history of the 2001 penny, how it was made, why most examples are worth only their 1 cent face value, what kinds of errors and mint mark anomalies can make some coins dramatically more valuable, how much these coins can actually fetch in the current market, and why a few Examples have made headlines for selling well into the six-figure range. If you've ever dreamed of finding something truly valuable in your pocket change, or if you've ever wondered how a coin worth 1 cent can be worth more than a car or even a house in some markets, stick around because this story is full of fascinating twists, unexpected mistakes, and real market value shifts that reveal just how powerful rarity and error coins can be. To understand why the 2001 penny can be worth so many different values, it helps to start at the beginning, where this coin comes from, how it was made, and what it was used for in everyday life. The Lincoln 1 cent series is one of the longest-running coin series in United States history. First introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, the Lincoln cent was designed by sculptor Victor David Brenner and marked a departure from previous coin designs by being the first regular circulation coin to feature a real person's portrait. Prior to that point, most U.S. coins had featured abstract depictions of liberty or stylized allegorical figures rather than recognizable historical individuals. The Lincoln cent's obverse design featured a portrait of Lincoln, and the reverse design originally featured wheat ears on either side of the words 1 cent. That reverse design remained in use from 1909 through 1958. Beginning in 1959 and continuing through the early 2000s, the reverse design featured the Lincoln Memorial, a depiction intended to mark the sesquicentennial of Lincoln's birth. By 2001, the Lincoln Memorial design had become so recognizable that most Americans barely gave a second thought to the coin in their pocket, but to collectors it continued to be a coin with a long history and plenty of subtle nuances and varieties worth studying. In terms of composition, pennies up through 1982 were made mostly of copper, with a small percentage of tin and zinc in the alloy. However, beginning in 1982, rising copper prices made that composition too expensive to maintain, and the U.S. Mint began striking pennies on a zinc core with a thin copper plating instead. This change drastically altered the physical characteristics of the penny. It became lighter and more prone to certain types of minting errors and plating issues. By the year 2001, nearly all circulating pennies were copper-plated zinc, meaning that the coin looked like copper but had a zinc core at its center. These coins were struck in massive quantities to supply the everyday needs of commerce. In 2001 alone, billions of Lincoln cents were produced across multiple mint facilities to keep up with the demand of everyday transactions. The main facilities producing these coins were the Philadelphia Mint, which struck coins without a mint mark, the Denver Mint, which struck coins with a small d mint mark just beneath the date, and the San Francisco Mint, which produced proof coins with an S mint mark primarily for collectors rather than general circulation. The Philadelphia and Denver cents were released into circulation and used by millions of people in everyday transactions, while the San Francisco proof pennies were sold directly to collectors in sets or as individual proof coins. For most people, the pennies they handled from pocket change, cash registers, or coin rolls were simply a part of life, something to make exact change, often put in a jar or piggy bank and forgotten. For most 2001 Lincoln cents, the story ends there. In ordinary circulated condition, most of these pennies are worth only their face value, 1 cent, and perhaps a few cents more to a beginner collector who wants a complete set of dates and mint marks for their collection. High-grade uncirculated specimens without any errors might be worth a little more, especially if they retain a strong red color or exhibit attractive eye appeal, but by and large the overwhelming majority of 2001 pennies are common and unremarkable in the collector market. For example, have you ever dug through a jar of loose change, pulled out what looks like just a simple penny, and wondered if there might be real money hiding in that copper-colored disc? What if I told you that a humble 2007 Liberty 1 cent, a coin you might shrug off while paying for groceries, has stories to tell and hidden value that can make some examples worth hundreds, thousands, or more, all because of minting mistakes, errors, and weird anomalies that slipped by the United States Mint's quality control? This seemingly ordinary 1 cent piece might seem like it's worth only a penny, but collectors have discovered examples with oddities so striking they fetch prices that make everyday coins look downright boring. In this deep dive, we're going to explore the full history of the 2007 penny, its circulation story, the kinds of errors and mint mark mysteries that exist, how to identify them, and why their market values can be worlds apart from their face value. If you've ever been curious about rare coins, error collecting, or how tiny differences in metal can mean big money to the right buyer, you're about to get the complete story. The Lincoln 1 cent series has been in continuous production for more than a century, and by 2007 it was already one of the most familiar coins in the United States. First introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, this coin was unique in American numismatics because it was the first regular issue to feature a real person on the obverse. Designed originally by Victor David Brenner, the Lincoln Cents portrait of President Lincoln has endured through multiple design changes and metal composition shifts over the decades. From 1959 through 2008, the reverse design featured the Lincoln Memorial, replacing the earlier wheat ears motif that had been used from 1909 through 1958. The Lincoln Memorial reverse was a familiar sight to generations of Americans, a building on the back of a coin representing a man whose leadership defined a nation. In 2007, that was still the standard reverse design, and millions of them were minted for everyday circulation. By the early 2000s, the physical appearance of a penny had changed dramatically from its early copper alloy predecessors. Rising metal costs had prompted the U.S. Mint to change the penny's composition in 1982 from mostly solid copper to a core of zinc plated with a thin layer of copper. These copper-plated zinc pennies are lighter and less expensive to produce, but they also behave differently during striking and wear in circulation. By the time the 2007 D penny was produced, the zinc core format was standard for modern pennies, and these coins were minted in massive quantities to meet the everyday needs of commerce. In 2007, the United States Mint produced Lincoln Cents at multiple facilities. The Philadelphia Mint struck coins that carried no mint mark, the Denver Mint struck coins that carried a small D mint mark just beneath the date, and the San Francisco Mint struck proof coins with an S mint mark that were sold directly to collectors in special packaging rather than released into general circulation. The Denver Mint, whose mint mark appears on the coins most people encounter in circulation, produced approximately 3,638,800,000 Lincoln Cents in 2007, billions of coins that were released into pocket change, cash registers, and coin jars across the country. For most people, these pennies were simply everyday money, coins used to make change, pay for small purchases, tipped into jars at restaurants, or saved in piggy banks for rainy days. In ordinary circulated condition, typical 2007 D pennies that show years of wear, dull surfaces, and the typical signs of use are worth only their 1 cent face value or perhaps a few cents more to someone completing a basic date and mint mark collection. For example, average circulated coins are typically worth around 1 cent, as the widespread production numbers mean that condition alone doesn't bestow much rarity. Even uncirculated 2007 D pennies without any peculiarities often trade for modest premiums if they look like they just came from a roll. Coins without wear and with original red coloration might be worth $1 or $2, and many collector guides list uncirculated examples with attractive surfaces at values that can reach into the low single-digit dollar range. However, within this massive run of billions of coins lurk error coins, mistakes, and varieties, those rare cases where something went wrong during the minting process and left behind a coin that did not match the thousands of others struck that year. These error coins are where the true excitement of coin collecting lives, and where the market value can differ dramatically from face value. To understand how such mistakes occur, it's important to know a bit about how coins are made. Pennies start as blanks, called planchets, which are metal discs manufactured to specific size and metal.